Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Neeru Tandon, Department of English, VSSD College, Kanpur. We are discussing paper on linguistics and this module number 22, application of various syntactic rules, has been written by an independent scholar of Hyderabad University, Suma K. In this module, let us get some understanding about the application of various syntactic rules with regard to human language in general. Before that, first let us recall what we understand by rules or grammar and how it is important for language. We know that grammar is a set of rules. A sentence in language cannot be constructed just by a random grouping of words. There is a systematic order in which words are arranged to form a sentence. Tree, flies, Raju thank office. Raju thanked the 3 fools in his office. In the above examples, we know that first one is not a sentence while second one is a proper sentence. Second is a sentence because of the fact that it has a systematic arrangement of words where each word has a systematic function known not only to the sender but also to the decoder, and in the same way when the sender sends the message, speaks the sentence, the decoder understands by decoding that in that systematic way. So the process of communication that takes place in the proper sense. We know that rules follow a specific order. Some questions to ponder therefore are: how do the rules of grammar apply in a phrase, clause or a sentence? Do these rules apply in the same manner in all the languages of the world? To find answers to such questions, let us observe how a child learns language. We see around us that just a 5 or 6-year-old child can speak so much and so well. Did the child learn all of that language by memorizing the language he or she was exposed to? Or should we think that there is something else within the child that has made it possible for the child to attain such proficiency in its native language? When we observe closely, we cannot just say that the child learnt it all by imitating the language of the adults around him. This is because many a time we are left surprised by the child's ability to use language. Very often we notice that very young children produce language that is far more complex than the language they are exposed to. They may coin new words or even show that they can understand, respond and produce complex structures in language. For instance, let us look at the sentences below. This is the book that I kept on the table. The second sentence, this is the book I kept on the table. I think that India will win the match. I think India will win the match. Who do you think that India will defeat? Who do you think India will defeat? Who do you think that will win? Who do you think will win? Now, from these examples, from 1 to 3, the child might understand that the word that is optional in certain English sentences. But how is it that the child perceives that in a sentence like 4, that is always not present? It cannot be possible that such an understanding comes merely from observing or imitating the sentences other people around the child speaks. So there is definitely a gap between the structures the child is exposed to and the structures the child is able to perceive and produce. This gap is known as the poverty of the stimulus. It is not enough to say that the child learns to apply the syntactic rules of its language merely by observing and imitating the speech of the adults around him or her. In this particular diagram, on poverty of stimulus, you can see that there is a wide gap. The child is at the center. At the one end, it is exposure to language, and on the other, there is production of language, and there is a wide gap between the two. What then triggers this understanding and application of the syntactic rules in human languages? To explain this, Noam Chomsky came up with the idea of innateness hypothesis. Children can produce and understand complex grammar of their language without any formal training to learn that language. Chomsky says that this is possible because they must have something that is like an innate plan which is common to all languages. According to innateness hypothesis, an innate plan makes it possible for children to figure out the grammatical rules of the language that their parents or other elders around them speak. Using these rules of the structure of their language, children can produce innumerable phrases, clauses, and sentences, including those that they may have never heard before. Innateness hypothesis stands in contrast to other theories that had earlier assumed that children learn a language by imitating the speech of their parents or others around them. What is the evidence for innateness hypothesis? How do we show that children do not merely imitate to learn language, but rather implicitly acquire and apply the rules of grammar instead? Acquisition of the irregular past tense is an example. Let us now understand how children might acquire the irregular past tense in English. Initially, children observe and acquire the rule for irregular past tense formation in English, which tells them to add the suffix ed to the present tense form. Climb, climbed, walk, walked, talk, talked. Then they apply this rule to get past tense forms of verbs in all contexts and end up with forms such as the following for irregular verbs: runned, cut, cutted, go, goed. This is only for a short while until they learn that some verbs in English have irregular forms and therefore vary from the past tense rule they have already learned. So it is the innate ability that helps the children acquire the intricacies of the rules of grammar to learn any human language. It is further strengthened by the fact that children acquire any language they are exposed to quite effortlessly, while many people may have notions of some languages of the world as being difficult to learn and some others as easy. Innateness hypothesis. Innate plan to acquire language. You see, the child acquires language, learns implicit rules of grammar, and learns any language he or she exposed to in his own way. Human beings are capable of producing an innate set of structures by using a finite set of rules, that is, innumerable sentences based on just a few rules of grammar. Rules of grammar are common to all languages in the human world, including languages that are as different as English, Hindi, Italian, Tamil, or Japanese. The innate plan that gives the child the ability to perceive and produce languages comes from this grammar. This is what Chomskyan tradition of generative grammarians call universal grammar with the short form UG. Chomsky says, universal grammar may be thought of as some system of principles common to the species and available to each individual prior to experience. So UG, we see, is unique to humans and sets us apart from other species of life by giving us the capability of language. The language we usually and actually use is just a small part of this ability and what it could help us produce. The rules in UG can be further understood in two parts: principles and parameters. Principles refer to those rules of grammar that are common to all human languages. If rules are common, does that seem to suggest that all the human languages are the same? We see, for instance, that all human languages have a subject and a verb in a sentence. Raju sings. Raju, that is Noam, sing present 3 p.m. Raju gata hai in Hindi, and we say Raju sings in English. So that is, in the same way we have a subject and we have a verb in the sentence. The languages are different, but these two parts are same. Now consider the two sentences given below. Raju sings a song. Raju gana gata hai. In Hindi, when we say Raju gana gata hai, this gana or the song in English, though the order changes, yet the parts of the speech are same. We see there is a clear difference in structure between English and Hindi. The rules that account for these kinds of differences are called parameters. What we see in different sentences is an instance of word order parameter. Parameters are the language-specific rules that bring about variation among different languages of the word. We will see now that the principles in UG give the option of two word orders, VO and OV, that is verb and object and verb. That is verb followed by the object and the object followed by the verb. English chooses the first option of verb and object, and Hindi chooses object and verb. Summing up, we see that UG has two parts, principles and parameters. UG contains principles that are absolutely universal to all human languages. These do not vary from language to language. Parameters that are specific to each language are selected from a vast range of principles that are available in human language. Differences between languages of the words are made possible by these parameters. Let us now look at some more examples of principles. Principle 1. Sentences in all human languages have a subject and a verb which agree with each other. We learned that the verb has arguments depending upon the kind of verb it is. Dogs bark, that is one argument. The cat caught the rat, there are two arguments. Raju bought Meera a ring, there are three arguments. Here the subject is always present, while the objects are optional and are dependent on the verb. Here is one more example for principles. Embedding principle. An embedding principle specifies that any grammatical sentence can become a subordinate clause in a complex sentence. For example, John had resigned, it was clear. Second sentence, we can say that John had resigned within square brackets was clear. Or another form may be, it was clear that John had resigned. Now sentence A, John had resigned, it was clear, has two independent sentences, while B and C are complex sentences and they have a subordinate clause, John had resigned. Now let us look at examples for parameters. Null subject parameter. We already know that a subject and a verb have to be present in a sentence. This is evident in English in most contexts of usage. We can't say is playing. However, in some languages of the world, the subject may not be present in the sentence uttered by the speaker. That is, the subject is dropped. We see this happening in Hindi. In a context where someone asks, where is Ram? The response in Hindi need not have a subject in it, but may contain just the verb as in D and E. In sentence D, when in Hindi we say, Ram kahan hai? And in English we say, where is Ram? Khel raha hai. That may be a complete sentence in Hindi, but in English when we say is playing, that is not a complete sentence. That cannot be a complete sentence. Either we'll have to use noun, Ram is playing, or we'll have to use a pronoun, he is playing. So we see that the subject is dropped in Hindi, while this is not possible in English as seen earlier. Null subject parameter, as shown in the above examples from Hindi and English, marks a difference in the structure of these two languages. Nevertheless, at the core, Both languages are the same in their structure, for both have a subject and a verb in their sentences. The subject may be overtly pronounced or may not be pronounced. Now in this chart you can see that universal grammar is there. On one hand there are principles, on other hand there are parameters. In principles we have common to all human languages. They are absolute and do not vary, and examples like embedding principles. In parameters we have specific to each language. They vary according to the rules of each language, and the example is null subject parameter. Now let us look at the word order parameter. In English, the subject comes before the verb in a statement, as in the chef cooked the broth, that is a statement, while there is an inversion of the subject and the verb in question, as did the chef cook the broth, that is the question. So in English, questions are formed with subject auxiliary inversion. In Hindi, we cannot apply this rule. बावर्ची ने भात बनाए, the chef made the broth. क्या बावर्ची ने भात बनाए? Did the chef make the broth? One can see that there is no word order difference, and the subject and the verb do not change their position in both the sentences. Now let us consider the head parameter. We know that every phrase has a head. For instance, the object of the verb phrase occurs to the right of the verb head, as in the sentence Ram ate an apple. The verb head eat occurs to the left of the object apple. Therefore, English is a head-left language. Similarly, in a prepositional phrase in English, the preposition occurs to the left of the phrase. For instance, look at the phrase Ram is in the classroom. In the above example, the preposition in comes to the left end of the prepositional phrase in the classroom. However, not all languages are head-left languages. The principle is that head is obligatory in the phrase. Nevertheless, the head parameter allows each language to determine where the head occurs in the phrase. So, some languages like Hindi, Japanese, Telugu, Kannada, etc. are head-right languages. In these languages, the head occurs to the right of the phrase. Let us look at examples from Hindi in two more sentences. Ram ne apple khaya. Ram ate an apple. We see that the verb head eat occurs after the object apple. Now look at the sentence Ram kaksha mein hai. Ram is in the classroom. Similarly, in the preposition in occurs after the noun phrase classroom, which is a constituent in the prepositional phrase. So we can see that Hindi is a head-right language and English is the head-left language. When a child is exposed to a language, the principles apply commonly to all the languages. Parameters apply differently to each languages. For instance, child has to choose between applying the head-left or head-right parameters. While an English-speaking child applies the head-left rule, a Hindi-speaking child applies the head-right rule. When a speaker learns another language, there could be errors caused due to faulty application of rules in parameters. Syntactic rules do not apply alike to all languages, and the principles may be at the core and apply as a common feature in all language. Parameters are more language specific and apply differently to different languages of the world. When the child learns to speak, the core principles are already innately encoded. These principles are absolute and form the common basis of the human language. Depending on the parameters of the languages that the child is exposed to, the child acquires the variations in the structures of those particular languages. The application of the syntactic rules helps the child acquire the implicit knowledge of the grammar. The application of the syntactic rules also helps the linguist in extracting the explicit knowledge of the grammar of the human language. Before finishing, let us talk about two more important things related with syntax, that is syntactic atoms. The basic unit of syntax is not the word but the syntactic atom, defined as the structure that fulfills a basic syntactic function. Syntactic atoms may be either a single word or a phrase that fulfills a single syntactic function. Suppose I say the dog ate the bone. Then I say the big yellow dog ate the bone. And finally I say our dog that we raised from a puppy ate the bone. Now elements with syntactic equivalence all belong to the same type of syntactic atom. Here we have noun phrase as well as verb phrase. A language also contains specific rules for properly connecting syntactic atoms to form sentences. These are called phrase structure rules. The sentence "the big yellow dog ate the bone" is well formed because it uses the parts of speech in a way that conforms to the rules of English syntax. The string of words big, the, ate, bone, dog, yellow, the is not a sentence because it is a jumbled sentence and it violates syntactic rules. It is often not even possible to assign any meaning to a syntactically ill-formed utterance. This is why the syntactic rules of a language can be followed perfectly to produce illogical or semantically high improbable sentence. The bone ate the big yellow dog. Since a new context could be imagined to render such a statement at least fictionally logical, it is fortunate that our language has a ready-made means of expressing it. The fact that syntactic structures are not restricted in the meanings they may express is one reason why we can so easily produce novel sentences never before heard. The semantic independence of the phrase structure rules is one of the main factors that provides for the infinite creativity of human language. Animal systems don't have any structural unit, they are meaningful yet totally independent of meaning. Now in this particular connection, we should also discuss syntactic relations and phrase structure rules. Let's examine syntactic relations within English sentences. One approach is to divide the words of a sentence into phrases. This technique is known as parsing. The most fundamental division is between subject and predicate. Phrase containing different parts of speech can serve one and the same function. He ate the old bone. The big yellow dog ate bones. The big yellow dog slept. The dog growled at John. Each of these sentences consists of a subject and a predicate, but in each sentence different syntactic types of words or combination of words constitute subject and predicate. Different combination of part of speech fulfilling the same syntactic function are said to be syntactically equivalent. To summarize, we can just say that it is so clear that whenever we form a sentence, we are supposed to follow the rules, the grammatical rules of the syntax. Unless and until we understand that which part of a speech will follow the other, we cannot form a meaningful sentence. It depends language to language, it varies language to language. Like in Hindi, we say, मैं आम खाता हूँ, I eat a mango. So it is something, the object comes later. So where we will place the object in English sentence and where we will place the object in Hindi sentence is according to the rules of that grammatical rules of that particular sentence. So knowing the syntax, knowing its parts, knowing the values is very, very important to understand the grammar, understand the language in totality. Keep learning. Thank you for visiting EPG Pathshala.